Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Healing Words Podcast. By age 12, Keyshawn McMiller had already identified his mission in life, helping others reach their full potential. Today, he's a clinical social worker teaching teens and young adults the benefits of lifelong learning and personal growth. He's also an author who champions the importance of HBCUs and the urgent need to close the equity gap, issues that played a pivotal role in his own college journey. Thank you for joining us, Keyshawn.
Hey, thank you for having me, Miss Nichols.
Okay, so age 12, when most young people are playing video games and you had already identified your mission in life. How
Yeah,
did that come about?
it's a great question. That's a big question. I have always been this phrase gets a negative rap, and it's something that has affected me, but people pleasing, right? And
Mm,
so I remember growing up and being in a space where I just wanted to, uh, I wanted people to be happy,
mhm.
right? I wanted people to just enjoy the space that they were in. And so for me, that was done by way of helping them, right? How can I help you get the best experience, wherever we are, right? And so right by age 12, puberty's coming on, a lot of hormones are happening. I knew that I wanted to help people in some way, shape, or form. Once in that moment, number one, and then as I got older, number two. So really wanting to help people really came out of a space of that people pleasing aspect. Now I do call myself a recovering people pleaser, right? Because there's levels to it. But and so now I call myself more of a helper, um, as opposed to a people pleaser.
Okay. And like you said, when you started, it does have a negative connotation, but when it started in you, it
Mhm.
wasn't negative.
Um, Maybe when I was younger, but right in full transparency, it did get to a point where I was working to fill other people's cups more than I was filling my own, right? And so that can then lead to a loss of sense of self, right? Loss of self. What do you want versus what you think other people might want, right? We can fall into that sort of habit, and I did. And so it took, counseling, it took self-reflection to really come back from that. And so, right, a recovering people pleaser. But I'm proud to say I've gone through that journey. 'Cause I know so many other folks are going through that even
Wow.
today.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so in your work with teens and young adults, because you've come through this, do you see it? Are you able to recognize it in someone that you're serving?
Yeah, I do see it a lot. I think when folks are young and they see an older person, I mean, I would do this too. When you see someone who's cool and you look up to them, you're like, oh, I want to do what they're doing. You try to align either your behaviors with what they're doing, or you'll be a quote unquote like a what they call a teacher's pet, right? And I mean, these things are fine. I think when you are young, when you find well, let me say this. Sometimes the role models that we choose are not the right role models, right? And I know, and I'll say more about that when we talk about some of the books that I've published. However, when you find the right role model, I think it's a smart idea to work to model some of those positive behaviors that they're exhibiting. But again, as you get older, you want to align yourself with, okay, I can take this piece of them, but still keep this piece of myself.
Right. And not the whole kit and caboodle, particularly
Right.
if some of it is negative.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Okay, so what are you hearing and seeing that young people need and desire, actually?
Sure. That's good. Young people today are faced with uh, it's the wild, wild west. There's so many opportunities for young folks. You look at the further democratization of education. I was just chatting with someone about this. So we had college, right? College was the big thing. You graduate from high school, you go to college. Now we have things like medical TikTok and entrepreneurship on YouTube, right? You can essentially earn your MBA on YouTube, right? You can earn your MD on TikTok. And so, how does that change a young person's life today where the messages that their parents or their aunts or uncles have heard is you got to get good grades and you got to go to college? Well, I don't have to go to college to make a living. In fact, college may not even be the right choice for me because I don't want to, even if you don't end up in debt, right? This degree may not give me the return on investment that I would get if I were to simply start a business or go into or start in a company and build my way up. So I think young people are today are really looking for an answer. I think they're looking for clarity, but I also think, and so to tie it back into what we were talking about earlier, about mentors, I think it helps for them to really seek that. I think they are seeking mentors, right? They're looking for someone that can show them the way, but it has to be a combination of having the right mentors and you doing the self work to say, okay, this is what I want, right? As opposed to what I think other people want.
Let's talk about the role of integrity, honesty, um, personal development, looking inward
Good.
plays into all of that.
It's good. So yeah. And I started off that last answer talking about social media.
Mm,
And of course, we know some of the pitfalls. Now, social media itself is not inherently bad. Contrary to popular belief, social media is not bad. There are people who put bad things on social media, right? Social media is simply the tool. It's how the tool is being used, right? That we can differentiate whether it's quote unquote good or bad. Nevertheless, integrity, self development, being true to yourself. There are a lot of people out there, a lot of young people out there who don't know who their true selves are because
mm,
they are online and they're looking at other people live their lives instead of them living their own life.
right.
And so, again, it all ties back to what we were talking about a couple questions ago. It's okay to see someone or see an aspect of someone. This is my opinion, as long as it's positive.
Mm,
I want it to be something positive and something that's going to build them up. It's okay to take that aspect and say, okay, that's something that I want to work towards. But it may not always look exactly like what that person has, right? We can't compare our chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 30, right? So if we're
right.
looking at a young person, let's say I'm looking at a young person and they're like a multimillionaire or something or other. I'm like, oh wow, well, okay, I want to be a millionaire too. I'm gonna do exactly what they do. Well, without me fully knowing the full context of their story. Well, they went bankrupt twice. They had to cut off, X number of family members, or they did the personal development work, right?
Right.
That's
Right.
so big. And so social media, you're not always getting the full context, especially if you're doing, yeah, and I'm getting a little technical, but especially if you're watching like short form content, which would be like reels, like Instagram reels or TikTok videos or YouTube
Mm,
shorts, as opposed to like a long form video, like a podcast interview on YouTube or something of that sort. So the
right.
context.
Right. Right. Okay, let's switch to your books. You are an author. I want to talk to you about your book about HBCU love, historically
Go.
Black colleges and university, for those who don't know what that means. According to you, they're more than just HBCUs. They're more than just that title. They have inherent worth and have really shaped our society. Tell us your thoughts on HBCUs.
Well, first and foremost, let me say it's fitting that I'm on this podcast today. It's National Authors Day.
Mm.
So happy National Authors Day to the authors out there. Um, Tying that to HBCUs, I am standing on the shoulders of some very pivotal HBCU affiliated authors. Toni
Hmm.
Morrison, Langston Hughes, Claude McKay, right? Zora Neale Hurston, right?
Yes.
Just to name a few. And so in HBCUs, number one, let's talk about why they were started. HBCUs were started out of a need, right? We could not go to, Black folks could not go to the same schools as our white counterparts. We weren't allowed. And so HBCUs were birthed out of that need and that belief that once we were freed from slavery, our ancestors, we deserved, and even at that time, we deserved education to advance ourselves, to advance our community. And so HBCUs have continued to stand the tests of time for over 150 years. And so HBCUs are not just institutions of higher learning, they are literal pillars of Black resistance. We understand that, okay, HBCUs were born during post antebellum or civil rights era, or rather the Civil War era. But what have they lived through? They've lived through the civil rights era. They're continuing to live through what we're going through now, right? With, if you want to talk about uh, uh, just the extremists, right, and the continued racism, the continued prejudice, right? It hasn't stopped, and in some way, shapes, and forms, it's only intensified, especially with the invention of social media and the advancing of the internet. And so, still, HBCUs thrive. Still, they continue to produce top level talents, top level judges and doctors and lawyers, right? Fields that were previously dominated by our white counterparts, right? We are now showing up in these spaces and we're thriving. And so, being those pillars of resistance, I feel as though HBCUs can teach not only college bound students, right, high school students, but they can also teach our younger students as well, that is, middle school and elementary school scholars, about what it means to fight the good fight, right? While also being able to learn what I call true Black history in the face of the watering down of such in public education.
Okay. And so that's a perfect place to end because that happened in your life. You got a chance to not just say what you just said, but to test it and live it out. You were attending an HBCU,
Yes.
and in our last election before that, um, you lost your scholarship because you took a stand. Could you tell us what happened?
Yes. Um, yes, I can tell you what happened. And so during the spring of 2017 commencement ceremony, this was at Bethune-Cookman University. I earned a band scholarship, so I marched with the world famous Marching Wildcats of Bethune-Cookman. And during this time, I was in the band that was selected to play at that particular commencement or graduation, means the same thing, ceremony. And so Betsy DeVos, who was in 2016 or 2017, Donald Trump's Secretary of Education at the time, she was selected to be the commencement speaker for Bethune-Cookman and HBCU's commencement ceremony. And no problem with that. However, when I started to do a little bit of digging, Betsy DeVos was a pioneer, or rather, she was quoted with saying HBCUs were pioneers of choice schools. Now, as I just said in my soliloquy, HBCUs were schools born out of need, right?
Hmm.
They were only created because we could not go to the same schools as white people. So it was not a choice
Right.
for us to create these schools. We needed to create them. And so my band director got wind of my comments in the newspaper that I later made, saying that I would not only not attend this commencement ceremony, but I would not be playing in the band during the ceremony. And so as a result, I was given the decision of either continuing to play, right, or I could not play and lose my scholarship. And so, as you just started the story with, I did lose my scholarship, so I did not play.
And that was that important for you. You were able to stand on that.
Yes. I don't know. It was there was just something deep in me, and I spoke to my parents about it. I spoke to my aunt, who was an alumni of the university, about it. I said, "Hey, if you feel this strongly, go for it. We believe in you." I knew I would be fine either way, because I had built myself up to a point where it didn't matter where I was going, right, in terms of school. I knew I would be successful.
Okay. And that really does play into your other books. So we're going to talk about those very briefly, but um, the whole thought process that you have and that you are teaching young people, know yourself, be able to make your own decisions, choose good role models. And
Yes.
you're doing all of that. Now you have another book, um, Ideals from a Young Black Introvert. And in that book, you're telling young people to look for alternative solutions to society regarding certain situations because society is going to lead you this way, but you really should be going this way.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. And so really, right, and so Ideals from a Young Black Introvert was my first book ever published. It came to me in a dream, literally in a dream. And I said, I woke up in the middle of the night. I said, I got to get this stuff, I got to write this stuff down. And I ended up publishing it all within learning about self-publishing, getting the cover made by a friend, all within the time span of about 2 weeks to a month. And
Wow.
so for me, it's a matter of just opening our minds to what's all possible. I learned this phrase in grad school from one of my professors, Dr. Price. She always talked about reimagining. And
Mm,
so what I mean by that is you can take a typical scenario or a typical happening, and you can say, okay, well, if I was, if I was in this scenario, I would probably do this. Well, let's reimagine it. What would it look like to do something else and still get the same result, right? Or still get a similar result. And
right,
so, and so, if you want to compare it to something, it's like when they say there's more than one way to, I won't say skin a cat, but there's more than one way to feed a cat, or
right,
there are a thousand paths. There are various paths to the goal.
right. Okay. And you have another book, A Black Male's Path to a King's Mentality. And when that book, you're telling your reader, who are males predominantly,
Yes.
don't go the route of, if you're watching media is sending you all into sports or jail. But you've got all of this over here. Again, the same message all the way through.
Reimagining.
Hmm.
Yeah, I never realized that until now. Thank you for pointing that out. So winners. So winners is a way to reimagine who we are as Black men. Uh and so right, winners is a spinoff of, the racist colloquial term, the N-word, which is something that I don't use, understanding the history behind that word. And so reimagining it, what would it look like if we called ourselves not winners, but right, winners,
Hmm.
putting some swag on it. Well,
Right.
what would it look like if you started calling yourself a winner? How would that not only change you as a person, but change the people, the Black men in your circle? And so I believe that we look at, and I spoke about it with the social media thing, we look at the famous people in life and we say, I want that. I want to be like that when I grow up. However, I encourage you to look around you and look at those folks that are a few degrees closer to you. Mr.
Mm,
Johnson, who owns the barber shop around the corner from you, your next door neighbor who's been diligently working and has now retired and has enough money to, vacation, every summer. And so we often try to Um, we often try to aim for these. I'm not going to say they're unrealistic because anything is possible. However, I encourage in winners, I encourage my Black males to seek mentorship and support from men that may be more likely to actually give it to them because they are so close to them, right? They're around the corner. They're
Mm-hmm.
your Black male teachers or your Black male administrators, folks that you interact with every day.
Hmm.
And so instead of seeing them, right, open comment, instead of seeing them as either like opposition or folks you wouldn't see, perceive any value from, have a conversation with these men. I guarantee you that they hold within them more wealth of knowledge, more insights than you give them credit for. If only you'd have the courage to have a real conversation with them.
Right. I want to go back to something you said a few minutes ago. We were talking about the decision you were making, decision you were coming to step away from your scholarship. You said you
Yeah.
spoke to your family, your parents, and
Yes.
that's Black males again, because in one of your books, you actually go out and the people in your family, you're getting advice from them to put in the book. So your
Yes.
tribe is very important. What would you say to young people, not just young Black men, but young people who don't have a tribe? How can are they able to develop their own tribe? How do they identify?
You're absolutely able to develop your own tribe. They say a family is not born something you're born into, but something that you choose, right?
Mm,
And so, just as I spoke about earlier, who are those people, right? Not just Black men, but who are those influential figures around you? Maybe they're not in your household, but are they in your school? If you go to church, are they in your church? If you're in a community center or if you in some sort of extracurricular activity, are they the leaders in those spaces? And so I believe there's always someone of influence that is around you who can provide insight to you if only you'd have again the courage to reach out to them. But also I want to empower these our older folks, right? Those folks seeking to be mentors, those folks who are actively pouring into the younger generation to intentionally look for folks to pour into, right? It may not always be the person who's out front and eager who needs that support. It may be the person who's in the back, who's shy, or who may seem quote unquote too cool for school. Make that effort to reach out because they might need you now more than ever.
right, exactly. Okay, your books are on Amazon. If someone wanted to learn more about you, can they find you online? Do you have a website, your social media?
Social media, well, yeah, going back, my books are on Amazon. You can search my name, Keyshawn McMiller, and they'll pop up. But you can also find me on social media. I'm on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. My at is I, as in the letter CSEEYOU_HBCU. You can also find me on LinkedIn. You can just search my name again, Keyshawn McMiller, exactly as it's spelled.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so we're at are you working on another project? Let me ask you that. Are you working on anything else right now?
So many projects, so many irons in the fire. I'll have another book from the ICU HBCU series coming out within the next 6 months. So I'm really excited about that,
Okay,
amongst other
excellent.
things.
Okay, great, great. Keep it up. Okay, so we're at the point in our talk where I ask you the same five questions I ask all guests here. We're the Healing Words podcast. So I'm going to ask you a question using the first letter from the word words. And I want to gear this towards your HBCU book.
Sure.
W, when? When did you know for certain that you would write this book?
ICU HBCU was written about 2 years ago, so 2022. And I wish I could tell you where I was at this point in my life. I know I was in grad school. So funnily enough, I went to grad school at a PWI. And so I think for me, I had always reflected on my HBCU journey, but as I spoke about with the value of HBCUs, I always saw it coming from the space of, well, if you're getting ready to go to college, you should think about an HBCU. And so, using that word again, reimagining, what would it look like to take these lessons of HBCUs and tailor them to to a younger audience?
Okay. Obstacles. What were there any obstacles that you had to overcome in the writing of
Yeah.
this book?
So this is my first children's book. And so with a children's book, okay, you can't necessarily, well, I would argue and say you can't just have words in a children's book. You've got to have
Mm,
some sort of illustration. And so, whereas my first book, Ideals from a Young Black Introvert, I could easily write and publish that, like I said, in 2 weeks to a month. Whereas with ICU I needed to find an illustrator. We needed to draft up the illustrations, approve them, then
right.
add on the words, right? So it was a much longer and deeper process.
I'm a writer as well. Did you align with your first illustrator, or did you have to go through a process? The first illustrator you chose, is that the one you went with?
I was very blessed to have my cousin Brian McMillan. You'll see, if you
Okay.
have ICU HBCU, you'll see his name there. He actually attends an HBCU as well, so I'm proud to say that that book was written and illustrated by HBCU affiliated scholars. And so
Okay.
my hope is that he'll continue to write and illustrate for future ICU HBCU books.
Excellent. Okay, R, rear view. Knowing what you know now, is there anything that you would do differently?
Yes. In terms of ICU HBCU, again, I see the mission of that book is more than just a book. I mean, I can say that about all of my published works, but ICU HBCU is now moving towards what I will hope it to be, what it will become a movement. And so I wish looking back, I would have moved more intentionally sooner to build it up as such. Now, but even in saying that, I am grateful for the lessons that I've learned thus far, and I
Mhm.
think I am more capable to move it to what it will be now than I was back in 2022.
Okay, excellent. Now, for the D is delete. When you were writing these books, we're going to talk about all the books now. Was
Sure.
there anything kind of controversial, maybe a little painful, maybe a little sensitive, and you were wondering, maybe I shouldn't put that in there, or maybe I shouldn't say it this way?
Yeah, yeah. The first book that I thought about was my second book, Winners. And so really the title of Winners has the N word in it. And I was
Hmm?
really going back and forth about whether I should keep that in there or not. But I think it is a powerful title because it gets people thinking, well, what do you mean? Right.
Yeah.
So
And
I'm
and
I'm glad.
if nothing else, like why did you put that on the front of your book? Right.
Yeah, yeah. And I've had people, people have mixed feelings about that. And then when I explain it to them, it's like, okay, I get it. So
Excellent. Okay, S, strengthen. How have you been strengthened by the writing of this book? How has it changed you?
we're focusing on ICU HBCU.
Hmm.
I think it's allowed me to go deeper into, again, my own experience at an HBCU. And so I reflect on the challenges that I went through, even in my first semester at an HBCU, where I almost flunked out academically. And it was through mentorships and relationships, and it was through fully integrating myself into the culture of HBCUs that I was able to bounce back and not only graduate right with that degree, but graduate with two master's degrees, concurrently in the years following that. So it strengthened me, yes, quite a whole lot.
Okay. So you know what these young kids are going through then. You know exactly what they're going through.
Yeah, I can definitely relate.
Okay. I want to thank you so much for dropping in today. We had a couple of scheduling changes, and I just really wanted to have this conversation and help get your book out there. And I'm so grateful that you wrote the books, and that you stopped by to chat with us today.
Hey, thank you, Miss Nichols, and I want to encourage everyone out there, wherever you're listening. Uh, Denzel Washington says, "Fall down 7 times, get up 8," and he has something that he says. It's my one of my favorite quotes. He says, "Ease is a greater threat to success than hardship. So keep moving, keep growing, and keep learning."
Excellent. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time on the Healing Words podcast. Bye
Thank you
bye.
all. Bye bye.